To get a cookbook deal, it helps to have an agent. But how do agents work with authors, and what makes a successful partnership? Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for readers, writers, and cooks. This is Kate Leahy, and I'm here with Kristin Donnelly and Molly Stevens. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello.
I know we've been talking about having Lori Galvin on, our special guest today, for a while, but I just want to talk a little bit before we bring her on about why she's so special to this podcast.
Well, besides being a great agent.
Besides being a great agent, of course.
Well, she's one of the original back when we used to meet pre-Zoom, pre-everything.
Yeah, she was part of our monthly coffee clatch.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of listeners may have not heard the story about how our podcast sort of started out of monthly get-togethers that we did in pre-Zoom world. What were we using? Like Google Meet?
We did use Google Meet.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
But it was always video, right?
It was always video. And Lori was part of that. And at the time, she was the editor doing all the cookbooks for America's Test Kitchen.
Oh, she was still working at ATK when we started.
Yeah.
She did transition to agenting while we were still meeting.
Right.
Because we would sometimes talk about that.
Right.
Before we even started meeting, I worked with Lori when I did a number of books with Houghton. I co-authored that One Potato, Two Potato book at Houghton, and she was working with Rex Martin there. And then all those Best American books, she was there. So I had worked with Lori in her editorial role for years. I know.
Yeah.
And then she popped up as part of this group.
Right.
And then got too busy with her new gig as an agent.
Right. When she really got going as an agent, it didn't make sense for her to continue just talking about our little cookbook writing woes because she had a lot of other things going on and learning a whole different side of the business. But it's great to have her on today because we can really just hear what she's learned and what she's up to. Just a little bit of her background. So Lori Galvin is with the Avitas Agency. She represents adult fiction, especially women's crime fiction and mystery. She also has worked on a lot of nonfiction titles, including cookbooks, but not limited to cookbooks. Prior to joining Avitas, which is her agency, she worked as the executive editor at America's Test Kitchen, where she led a team that produced dozens of cookbooks, and some of them are probably on your shelves at home. She was also an editor at Houghton Mifflin, like Molly said. That's where they first crossed paths. And she also worked as a restaurant cook and, I think this is fascinating, ran a bed and breakfast in Maine. So if you want somebody who actually knows about writing and food, it's really hard to get a better person to talk to on the podcast. So with no further ado, let's bring her on. Lori, welcome to Everything Cookbooks.
Thanks so much. I'm glad to be here.
Yay.
I know. It's so nice to see your face. I know our audience can't see your face.
It's like
but,
old times.
Like old times. We've just had such long history together. So it's great to finally have you on.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was saying earlier that I was thinking, I shouldn't, 3 hosts and 1 guest. I should bow out. I was like, no, I'm not bowing. I want to be here. I want to talk to Lori too.
No. Yeah.
For the background for our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into agenting?
My last job prior to agenting was with America's Test Kitchen, and I had been a cookbook editor there for a number of years. And I just wanted to do something different and wasn't really sure about going to another publisher and doing the same job. I love experts, so I sought out a woman, a psychologist. She was a career counselor. So she specialized in career counseling. She just really whipped my butt on things and told me to stop making excuses and maybe really think about what other jobs could I do with my skills. She gave me homework, and which was, one of which was talk to anyone that is an agent who may have transitioned from editing. It was the best advice that she gave me, because that's basically how I ended up becoming an agent. For whatever reason, I was thinking I'm not this enough or that enough. And everyone I talked to said, it's so much like being an editor. And of course, you could do it kind of full circle. One of the agents I spoke with was the editorial director way back when I was an editorial assistant at Houghton Mifflin, and I ended up joining the agency that she's affiliated with. It worked out fantastically.
That's so cool. So you were kind of thinking about it, but it was like you were making the excuses.
Yeah, or it was just the counselor had said, give me some jobs that are like within the universe of editor. So, agent was one.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, okay, well, let's talk about that. I said, oh, no, I can't do that.
And then learning, I mean, obviously as an editor and editorial assistant, you've had a lot of work experience with agents, but
yeah,
learning to be an agent, was that on the job?
A lot of it, yes, it's on the job.
Yeah.
It's very entrepreneurial. I had great support from my colleagues, but it is learning on the job.
Yeah.
And
by entrepreneurial, you mean that you need to sign people to make your salary or your income.
Exactly. I have to find my own work. I have to be my own boss.
Right.
That's both gives you a lot of freedom, but is also a little terrifying at the same time.
Starting out, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah. But, I love it.
Yeah, I could see it being a situation where maybe in your past work, a cookbook idea would already be coming down the pipeline that you knew that you had to execute, but it wasn't necessarily the book that you wanted to do. And now all the books you do are ones that you want to do because you get to pick them.
Exactly.
So when you started out, you were primarily going to focus on cookbooks, right? Or did you always want to do a sort of a broad range?
Well, I thought I would do other types of books, but I thought it would mostly be nonfiction and, very food centric. It turned out, I did start out doing cookbooks, but then I also branched out to fiction, at which I, read a lot of fiction and love, and that is probably 75% of my list now.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, I was going to ask because you have such a strong culinary background, both, your own cooking experience, but then in the food publishing sphere. So I was going to ask about your own reading. Like, have you always been a voracious reader of fiction?
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of remember when we were still meeting all the time and you kind of having this switch, like, yeah, I really want to work with more fiction authors. Like,
And we were like, go for it. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
Well, and I think that's one thing, like when you do something for a long time and you're in the same field for a long time, even if it's different parts of the field, you kind of need fresh ideas or just fresh something, I think. So I feel like, do you think like your interest in fiction has affected the kinds of cookbooks or food-focused memoir that you're interested in, or no? Or do they kind of separate?
I think they're kind of separate, although I have noticed that there are some novels that I'm really drawn to the food in the novels in a certain way. One of my clients has her first book coming out this December called The Ghost of Waikiki. It's about a woman who comes home to Hawaii after many years on the mainland, and food plays a really prominent role in what she's missed about living in Hawaii. And it brings such a fun element to the story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also really moving too. When, she and I first talked about her manuscript, she had asked me about the food. Was it too much? And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is
Well, it's funny.
fabulous.
We've talked on this podcast about a sort of a pet peeve when you're going along reading fiction and there's food in it and they don't get it right.
I know.
It's like awkward.
It's like awkward. You're just like, I don't think you've ever eaten that before.
Yeah, or if you've never cooked that, you're like,
It ruins that whole suspension of disbelief. You suddenly like, wait, this story isn't true, even though you knew it wasn't true all along. But if the food isn't right, so it sounds like in this, The Ghost of Waikiki, this author has experience and gets it right.
Yes. Absolutely.
So if we have aspiring novelists listening and you're going to pitch Lori your manuscript, make sure you really get the food right because she will see to it.
And if you don't, I will correct you because I've been known to do that.
Right. Something Kate said about like the difference of being editor and agenting, it's that when you're editing, the book is already, you know what's coming down the pike. That's your work. But with agenting, you really have to trust your opinion. You have to see something and form an opinion, say this is good or this will sell or both, hopefully.
Right. Yeah.
Was that a learning curve as becoming an agent, or do you always have a strong sense of your own opinions?
I think I've had a bit of a learning curve, just trusting myself, knowing that if, there's like one thing that isn't like quite ringing to me, I need to really listen to that. And it can mean that maybe I'm not going to work with the author, and that's fine. Yeah, especially early on, I would say as an agent, I would just think, oh no, that'll be fine.
Mm.
But an editor will bring it up to me. And then I'm like, oh,
Mm,
I knew it.
Right.
yeah.
Oh.
You're like 7 years in or so
Yeah, I think 8 years now.
8 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Nice. Now, like, how are you finding your clients now that you're 8 years in? And what are you looking for? And what's that almost instant yes for you these days?
Especially for a thriller or mystery, I really look for a killer premise and something fresh, something that I haven't seen many times, something that really wants to make me turn the pages. Voice is so important to me. I love if I'm reading a manuscript and it feels like an audiobook to me, that's fantastic. That's or if I start like casting into
Interesting.
characters
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
head. For nonfiction, it can be, again, a great story. Sometimes it might be somebody who has great stories, but they're not a writer per se, like a chef. But, they have something important to say, something compelling to say. Just an example, Kwame Onwuachi, when I first saw him speak, this was, way back. I don't even think Top Chef had come out yet. He had taped it, but it hadn't aired yet. And I saw him give a 10-minute talk at a conference, and I was just on the floor. He just impressed me so much with what he had to say. And I met with him. We've been working together since 2018, maybe. To this day, I am still hearing stories from him that, he's just endless and also extremely inspiring. Yeah, that's another thing. Inspiration. That's something that really attracts me. And, I really love it when there's a hole being filled in the market. Like, oh, I haven't seen this before. When I was thinking about slab pies years ago when I worked at America's Test Kitchen, that was the first time I had seen a slab pie. And one morning early in my agenting career, I was, just thinking, oh, I don't think I've ever seen a book on slab pies. And I, looked it up, couldn't find it, and started doing some research, was connected with Kathy Barrow, who had written an article for the Washington Post on slab pies. And we were like off to the races during our first call. It just became clear to me she is the person to write this book. We couldn't stop talking to each other about the book. Like, I think I talked to her on a Thursday, Friday. We were like texting each other over the weekend. And, what if this was used for a crust? And,
Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's fun.
You mentioned something when you were talking about Kwame and when you met him and he had so many stories and was such an inspiration. But that's an instance where he was paired up with a writer. And I was so curious about how that happened.
Yeah, that's very interesting because he initially wasn't paired up when I sold the book. That was a bit of an obstacle with publishers. I had some publishers just say, no, we've got to pass on this. It wasn't just that he needed to have a professional writer paired with him. His social media wasn't as robust.
Like even then they were concerned about that.
Yep.
Wow.
But, I think in retrospect, those publishers are probably kicking themselves because he's just become very successful.
You saw a star on the rise and they didn't see it yet.
Yeah. And I think that when we went to publisher meetings, we went to New York and I think we had 2 full days or 3 full days. It was crazy of publisher meetings. And he was able to present himself and just knocked it out of the park. There was just in fact, the publisher he ended up going with, Knopf, it did not concern them at all about the social media or the writer. They just saw that there was this incredible story and we worked with them. They actually suggested Joshua David Stein and he and Kwame met and they're just fast friends now and know each other so well. Such a great team.
And that book was Notes from a Young Black Chef. That was his memoir,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
And then they went on to write a cookbook together.
A cookbook, and they're actually working on a third cookbook right now.
And there were recipes in the first book, I feel like, at the end of the chapters.
There were, yeah.
It's so interesting, though, because there's so many ways books get made, as we know, and then collaborations can form. And a lot of times I often think about it as being really early in the process. Even, a lot of times writers will work with their authors to create that proposal. But in this case, no, it was like the publisher that matched them up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it's economics. Some authors, aspiring authors don't have the money to pay a collaborator before they get a book deal. And, some people don't want to work on spec, and I don't blame them for that. So it's, it's a tricky situation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Since you've had experience on the editorial and the agenting side, I mean, looking at your career as an agent, what changes are you seeing in cookbooks?
Yeah, it's funny. I had a lot of fun with this question. I came up with the 4 P's and the 1 C. So the 4 P's are platform, package, pricing, and page.
Oh, we have a new chart. We're gonna have to put this on our Instagram feed for sure.
I mean, this is very anecdotal, but I just feel like platform has become bigger than ever. I mean, when I first started agenting in 2016, I had publishers, big 5 publishers saying to me, "Oh, they've got to have like at least 100,000 followers." And now, they're not going to say 1 million, but that's what they mean. I would just say, with the advent of TikTok and what else is coming next, that is really, really important to publishers. It almost reminds me of like the old days with bloggers, where everybody wanted to sign a blogger. Will all those books, translate into sales? Some of them will, but, I don't know that everybody who is on TikTok is also a book buyer. And I think it's too early to tell that now. I would say, platform has just become extremely important. The package is, and what I mean by the package is the photography. That's just, I mean, it's always been important, but I think it's even more important. And when you see books that are illustrated, they almost look super old-fashioned, even though I think that they can really work well, especially, say how-to illustrations. Pricing, I think they're more expensive than ever. And I think that that's probably something that's justified because they were, at that $35 for so long. And paper has gotten more expensive. So it's platform, package, pricing, and page count. I'm hearing more and more, when I'm negotiating a deal, that they want to stick to a particular page count. Before it was like, oh, if we have to add a signature, we have to add a signature. They're kind of cracking down on that.
So say you're running 5,000 words over, but they can throw in an extra, 8 pages. It makes it work. Who knows? Nowadays, it's like, nope, not going to do that because it affects too much in the sort of the supply chain, I suppose.
Well, the bottom line and...
Well, the pricing.
The
profit and loss. Yeah. Shrinkflation comes to books, I guess, right?
Oh my gosh.
Right.
That's a good way to put it.
Right. And I'm even seeing that on the page itself. I've been seeing books with shorter head notes and maybe not as much supplemental material. And I think because this has become a thing with some publishers, they want to make these card decks from a cookbook.
Yeah.
So they want to have so many recipes that can fit on one of those cards. And then my C is celebrities, whether it's an actress or a comedian, whomever. I saw the other day, Stephen Colbert has a book coming out.
Really?
With his wife.
So a cookbook with his wife. And it used to be when you had a celebrity, it was somebody who was, known for their food. I don't know, Trisha Yearwood, actually cooks a lot. And now, maybe Stephen Colbert cooks a lot. I don't know. But it's just really stunning to me, the number of book deals I see with celebrities. And, it just makes me wonder. And it's not just cookbooks, but I think, we just live in a culture that is just where celebrities are gods.
Yeah, they're writing kids' books, they're writing children's books. Yeah.
Do you think this is a little bit like how it was in the early 2000s with Food Network and everybody complaining that only people getting cookbook deals were Mario Batali and all the big Food Network or PBS show people? Then it went away from that, and now it's sort of swinging in a major way back to that.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, it was like Food Network, bloggers.
Right. Yeah.
TikTok people, back to celebrities.
Yeah.
Platform was the number one thing you said. But I know, Lori, you've represented some cookbooks recently by authors who don't necessarily have that huge platform. And Kathy Barrow is actually one, at least from an Instagram standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But she's super well respected. And then Irene and May Lee of Perfectly Good Food, we had them on the show and they were so great. And they also don't have a great platform, but they have a great idea. So where do those books fit in now these days?
I actually don't work with, I would say, like celebrities. I mean, some people have become celebrities, but I represent with my colleague, Bridget Motzi, Kelsey Barnett Clark, who won Top Chef a few years ago. And I she is considered, I think, a celebrity now and is amazing. But yeah, you're right. You had asked earlier about are publishers risk averse, and they are. But there are still publishers, I think, who recognize a good idea and see the value in somebody without a giant platform. And with the Lees, Norton is absolutely one of those publishers. Knopf is another. I'm sure there are others out there. I think Chronicle also, is a risk taker. Those are the ones that I've worked with. But for the most part, they want the million followers or the giant platforms.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting thinking about in terms of risk and being risk averse, and you as an agent have made this call that is not a risky, this is a good idea. This will be a good book. And the publisher, if they're just going by, the 4 Ps and the C, they're like, it doesn't fit in. But somebody has to say there's room for other books out there. Yeah. This isn't really a question. This is just me giving hope or wanting to believe.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I remember when I called Melanie Tortoroli at Norton to tell her about the Lee's Perfectly Good Food. She actually, was just so intrigued by the idea. We barely touched on platform. I mean, it wasn't part of the conversation. And with some publishers, it's one of the first things that comes up.
Yeah. With that book, because Package was the second one, did you know from the start, or was the idea that it was going to be illustrated?
Yes. We saw it very much as like a guidebook, part guidebook, part cookbook. I think we talked about birding books too at the time, in an early
like
conversation.
Field guides.
Right.
Yeah, field guide.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Andrea Nguyen. Are you enjoying this episode of Everything Cookbooks? I sure hope you are. But to be honest, it takes money to make every single show, and we need your help to keep the lights on. To pitch in, head on over to everythingcookbooks.com/support. There you'll see a range of options. If there's an insider event scheduled, sign on up to learn more about the cookbook publishing world. Order books through our affiliate page. We've got merch too, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and writing caps. Or just buy us a round of coffee. You can also leave us a review. Help us out however you can. Molly, Kristin, Kate, and I value every single bit of support. Thanks so much for your kindness.
I think a lot of our listeners actually have no idea what an agent does all day. So could you just tell us, say when you're working with the Lee sisters on their book proposal, like what is that relationship like? What do you do as an agent?
I mean, they're so good at what they do that I really don't have to do a whole lot with their proposal. I mean, we just sold their third book to Norton. It hasn't been announced yet, so that's all I can say about it. But
it's exciting.
Yeah. So I jump into their Google Doc and start making notes, and they make notes back. And
their Google Doc is the proposal?
The proposal.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I will probably like strengthen maybe the selling piece of the proposal because I know what editors are looking for, what's going to, ring their bells. And yeah, there's just a lot of back and forth, but I would say with the Lees, they are just real pros.
Now, what if it's a proposal that comes from someone and you see the idea, you see they've got a voice, you see it, maybe there's a hole in the marketplace, but the proposal isn't so, like the proposal's a little shoddy, but you see through it that there's promise in it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this happens with, first-time authors, all the time because they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
When we worked with Kelsey Bernard Clark, she has an incredible voice. She's worked in kitchens. She owns her own catering business. She is also very knowledgeable about gardening. We've just had to kind of like walk her through like what a proposal should have. Think about it in terms of an actual cookbook. Like, what are the elements you're going to have like on the page? What is going to be in the front matter? What ingredients would somebody have trouble finding everywhere except Alabama?
Right.
Yeah, I would say that, sometimes it's a heavier lift, but people usually get it. And usually it's because they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
I've had some proposals come into me and sometimes I don't have time to take something like that on. And I will say, you need to find somebody to work with you on this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And come back to me.
How important are comp titles in a cookbook proposal, and how should people find them? I think for authors, we can pick comp titles, but I don't think we ever pick the right comp titles that editors are looking for.
Yeah. It's really helpful to me when people do have comp titles, even if they're not all exactly right, because it just gives me a sense of how they see the book. And, I'm happy to, jump in and round it out. They may not have access to sales numbers and I can do that. But if somebody comes to me and they don't have any comp titles, that's a bit of a red flag to me. And it also shows me that maybe they don't know the market. And right. I really want to work with people who are aware of the market and can recognize why their book is needed.
Where it might fit.
Well, I guess that's the question, because sometimes people think, oh, no one has ever done this before. I will be the first. And it's like, well, actually, maybe there's a reason no one has done this before. Mm-hmm. Or you haven't looked hard enough because there's been a lot of books that have been done.
But there's also a comp title for that. There's a way to find a comp title for a book that's never been done before. It's finding a book that also...
Yeah. There's some element. It doesn't have to be exactly the same kind.
Right. Yeah. It could be the storytelling element from this cookbook meets the easy to follow recipes from this book or something like that. Would that work?
Yeah.
I've almost started thinking of comps in multiple ways where it's like you have editorial comps, but then you also have like market comps, because a way you approach a book editorially doesn't always translate to like the market. Or if there's like author comps, like this author has a similar platform. So I don't know. I don't know what you think of that. But I've been coaching of people a lot on finding comp titles, and I'm realizing like, oh, there's like so many ways to go. And
yeah,
it's almost like you find a few within each of those buckets.
Yeah. Sometimes what I do is, in the little intro paragraph to the comps, I might talk about some of those, pieces that are, in the writing style of, and then the books that I list are the ones, because those are the ones that the salespeople are looking at.
Yeah.
And they're, and make sure that those have, strong sales and are recognizable, and they're not going to be squishy in any way.
Right.
Do you have a definition for strong sales?
I think people can read between the lines. If it's 5,000 or 6,000 copies and it's a very small publisher, I think that can still be strong sales.
Okay.
And if it's a major publisher and the book probably got a really large advance and the sales are modest, then maybe that's a sign that, not a great book to comp. And maybe an author's not going to know that, but you can look to see how many reviews it has or what it's ranked on Amazon and see if it kind of like, I guess, because that's the thing about authors. We're always looking for information, but we don't have that sales information. So that's great to work with an agent who, you can access that through. Is it because you're part of an agency that subscribes to, say, the BookScan data, and that's where you can pull sort of sales numbers?
Yes. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question about the proposal? Just because it's come up with a few authors who've talked about their proposal being very design forward, putting a lot of design elements and so far as photography and things like that into it. And some authors we've talked to, that's actually come from the agent, like that they've wanted them to really package this. And is that something that you think is important?
I think it depends on the book. I've never submitted any like highly designed books because I know that the publisher is going to want to have a say in that. I mean, if there's something about the book, like I sold a manuscript a few years ago by a woman named Brianne Wills, who's a photographer, called Girls and Their Cats. She took pictures of girls with their cats and posted them on Instagram with like these little stories. So, I had some things to work with in putting together that proposal. It was super charming. But, for the most part, I don't know. I don't think it's that important. Other agents might disagree with me.
I think it's important because it does sometimes come up, and I think there are different ways to go, and I'm just glad to hear your response on that. So.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about platform and how it's more important than ever. But what are kinds of things that maybe an author now can do to build platform? Is it all about, say, social media followings? Are there other ways, building a Substack following, other things that they can do to kind of establish themselves as somebody with an audience?
Yeah, definitely. I think, leaning into their expertise, starting a Substack, probably prior to that, maybe they want to become known through maybe organizations speaking, public speaking, I think is a really good way, becoming like recognized by your peers. Then things like newsletters, I think can be great and really important. It's like when I tell fiction authors that you can't be a hermit. It's less important in fiction, social media, but there are other reasons, you want to be like known in the community and have support from that community, whether you're a novelist or a cookbook writer. So that's why I think, organizations are important. Conferences can be really important. You can make great connections at conferences. So much is online now, webinars, any of those things where you can become involved and meet other people doing what you're doing is important.
I love that. Don't be a hermit.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's great advice.
It's so tempting
I think
to
what's been hard because, we talked about like bloggers and everybody wanted to work with bloggers before. And right now, yes, it can be great to have a blog, but if you have a successful blog without super high social media following, I think it seems like it's not enough. At least that's what I'm hearing from people who have been pitching around. Like they can show huge numbers on their blog.
Yeah. One thing that's really important that people don't realize is be discoverable in some way or contactable. Sometimes, I will Google the person and they don't, have a social media, or they do. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to DM them. I mean, it's like, I know some people do that, and I've had to do that sometimes, but like, I think people should have a place where they can be contacted. If it's not DMs, have a website. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but something where you can receive a note. Sometimes I'm like, can spend 20 minutes and I'm like, oh, I can't find this person.
Wow.
Wow.
In this day and age. Yeah.
Be discoverable.
Be discoverable. That is a really good takeaway. If somebody wants to work with you, it's a food writer who either wants to do a cookbook or a memoir, what is the best way to get in touch? I know that you use, I think, is it Query Manager when people are pitching, but does that work for cookbooks too?
Yeah, they can use it for cookbooks, but I'd have to go back and check on that. You can use it for both fiction and nonfiction. Sometimes I'll get referrals and they'll just come to my email, but the best way to reach me is through Query Manager.
Query Manager, for people who don't know, can you just briefly explain what it is?
It's a platform for authors to submit their work to agents. Keeps things organized. Authors can check to see if an agent has like opened the file yet, where they might be. And agents will say, it will take me, like on their page, may take me 4 to 6 weeks to get back to you on a query, or maybe longer on a full manuscript. It's funny. One of my colleagues and I just wrote a little piece for the Shit Nobody Tells You About Writing newsletter on Query Manager.
Oh, great.
Oh, nice.
I will link to it.
It asks you all of the questions that you need to have answered for the agent. So instead of an email, you're not sure like what to submit. This will tell you like the query letter, comp titles, has it been published before? What's great is it's really gotten agents or me much more organized, because taking queries on email is just really hard because I have so many other things in my email.
Right.
If a query is in my inbox for longer than so many days, it turns red. So it's like wonderful that it has these prompts.
Can authors personalize the query through Query Manager?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I think that's something good for authors to know, because I've heard of authors like kind of like blanketing Query Manager.
Dear agent,
Oh yeah, they should.
Or just like the same generic like letter and reach out. So I just would want to emphasize, even if you pitch a lot of agents through Query Manager, to take the time to personalize them. I think it's just more appreciated, and you'll probably get a better response.
Absolutely. And it brings up a question I had, Lori. And if a new author were shopping for an agent or looking for an agent, what should an author be looking for? How do they find an agent?
I would just do your research. I mean, check out the acknowledgments of memoirs or cookbooks that you really like. You can find agents that way. I'm not sure if there are a lot of cookbook agents on Manuscript Wishlist, that site. There might be. Go to that site and, search for cookbooks, and that will give you editors and agents. Yeah, just in terms of, what to look for, I think it's really important, especially for cookbooks, find out how the agent is involved. Ask them to walk you through the entire process. Their job shouldn't end once they've sold the book, most especially for cookbooks, because there are so many moving parts in terms of, artwork and maybe recipe testing. So I'm involved in everything. If there's I want to be copied on everything. I mean, I don't want to interfere with the relationship between the author and the editor, but I need to know, I need to see the catalog copy. I need to know if there's a title changing. I want to see the shoot list, and I want to be in the publicity marketing meeting. So I would just say, make sure that you have an agent who's involved to that extent, because I think it's you don't want to be on your own.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point. And for listeners out there, I do know of agents. They get the contract and then they disappear.
They're done.
They're done. They're done. And it's nice to hear that, there's agents like Lori out there who are really willing to be your advocate, because that's what you want in an agent. Like, you want that person to be your advocate, especially interfacing with publishers, especially say, Kristin and I talked to a writer whose editor left, she had all these things, like she was orphaned, the imprint closed, all these things. You need your agent to then solve these things for you. That's why the relationship is so important.
I have a mini course about finding an agent, and it has a list of cookbook agents, including Lori is on it.
Oh.
But there are about 30 or so agents, but it also just walks you through like how to even think about finding an agent, how to know if you're ready, the querying process, what to expect, the questions to ask your agent if should you get to meet with some.
Okay.
Lori, are there certain cookbooks that you're looking for? Do you have like a cookbook manuscript wish list?
That's such a good question, and I don't. I wish I did. It's one of those things when I see it, I know it.
Right. Like the slab pie.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I wish that happened to me all the time, but it doesn't. So yeah, I just never know. I just look for expertise, a collaborative spirit in an author. There are some proposals or some pitches that like sell themselves. Those are the ones that I think every agent wants.
Yeah.
Lori, this has been such a great talk, and I think we all have been taking notes and with all the things that you've been able to share, and we really appreciated this long-term friendship that we've had, and seeing you kind of evolve in this career.
Oh, Oh, thank you. I think this is such a great idea, this podcast. I've listened to it and I've heard people talk about it, so I'm really glad it's become such a success. You just celebrated a year.
2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
I know, it flew by.
2 years. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I love hearing, and I know our listeners will, all about agenting and what cookbook authors questions should ask and think about. But just your own journey also is very inspirational to have left food editorial and figured out this. And I do remember when you started and how scary it was to start out in something where it is very entrepreneurial, and it's really wonderful to see the success you've had, and not just the success you've had, but the books that you have helped usher to the marketplace.
Really important books.
Yeah,
Right.
It's been an honor to watch.
Right.
Oh, thank you.
Well, this conversation has been a delight. Lori, thanks again for coming on, and we can't wait to see what other books you have in the pipeline.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. For more episodes and ways to contact us, go to our website, everythingcookbooks.com. The show is also available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your audio. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. It really helps. Any book mentioned in the show can be found on our affiliate page at bookshop.org. Thanks, as always, to our editor, Abby Cirquitella. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.